Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the December meeting of the Development Control Committee here at the Lake District National Park Authority. I'll start with the usual round of introductions for those that may not have been here before or for those that are viewing over YouTube. My name is Mark Kidd, Chair of the committee, and sitting to my right is Andrew Smith, who is the Head of Development Control, and sitting to Andrew's right is Kevin Richards, who is the Planning Manager here at the National Park. To my left is Daniel Milliken, who's our legal advisor, and Daniel will be doing the public speaking timer as well when we get to the applications. And to Daniel's left is Helen Hooper, who's the Member Services Coordinator. She'll be taking the minutes of the meeting today. And to my left and to my right are the members of the committee who will be making the decisions on the applications before us today. We do have one member we're expecting who's just stuck in traffic to come along to fill our committee out a little bit. So we'll just be waiting for him. But members, I suggest once we get through the first parts of the agenda, that we do the stuff on the back of the agenda, such as the delegated planning applications and note the appeals, just to give us a few more minutes for Phil to come along. Is that okay? And then we'll get into the applications proper. Yeah, okay. So our first item on our agenda is the usual, and it's apologies, and ask Helen if you could tell us which members can't be here today.
Certainly, we've had apologies from Doug Rathbone and Chris Southwood.
Yeah, but otherwise we are quorate for the meeting today. The minutes, members, the minutes from the previous meeting, can I sign those minutes off? All okay with that? Yeah. We have the minutes. Oh, there they are, right. There's a lot of pages on this one. Right, there's a few announcements I've got to make before we proceed with the meeting. The basic stuff. Firstly, the fire alarm. We're not expecting a fire alarm today, so if you do hear an alarm go off, please treat it as a real thing. The procedure is as follows: is to leave out of these doors to my left here. One of the members will open the doors and then proceed round the building clockwise direction and assemble at the fire point outside in the car park. But we're not expecting an alarm today, so hopefully it doesn't happen. The meeting is being live streamed over YouTube, and it'll stay on YouTube as a recording of what's happened today. And lastly, I'd like to ask if you've got a mobile phone or a device, if you could put it on silent, please. Declarations of interest. Members, do you have any declarations of interest on any of the agenda items today? Jim?
No.
No? Anything? No. No declarations of interest. The next item on the agenda, number 5, is questions. So this is a new item on our agenda. It's basically under our standing orders, people can ask any business relating to the work of the committee. And today we don't have anyone asking any questions about the business of the committee today, but it is on the agenda. Next agenda item is similar. It's public participation. Today there are no public questions, petitions or deputations of a general nature relating to the business of the committee. However, there are the individual planning application, public speaking items. I see Phil is here. Welcome, Phil. Members, site inspections. Do you wish to propose any site inspections? Any applications? No. Andrew?
No, I've nothing to recommend to the committee either.
So no site inspections this month. So members, now that we actually are as many of us that will be here, I suggest we just get straight into the planning applications. So our first planning application today, and normally we take our planning applications, those with public speaking first and then go in a numerical order. And the application we've got with the most public speaking today, the most public speakers, is number 8 on our list, and that's the field located between Lochrig Park and Borins Road in Ambleside. So that's our first application today, and Kevin, you're going to be taking us through this one.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. So we're reporting this application to you today because the recommendation of approval conflicts with the objections which we've received from Lakes Parish Council. And after my presentation, you'll be hearing in person from a representative of Lakes Parish Council. We've also had objections from 6 neighbours to this site. And again, you'll be hearing from some of the neighbours in person after my presentation. You'll also be hearing from a representative of the applicant. Committee visited the site when they took a decision back in 2023 on the original application. They also visited the site more recently, back in November, where they were able to view the proposals which are before you today. So the original 2023 planning permission, as I say, was a committee decision, and that was a decision to approve a housing development for a mixture of local needs and local affordable needs housing on a allocated housing site in Ambleside between Borrens Road and Loughrig Park. That development is now well underway, and following the commencement of development, we received a number of complaints from neighbours to the site, specifically in the eastern corner of the site, which I'll come on to in more detail. We opened an enforcement investigation, and we concluded as part of that enforcement investigation, and following some independent survey work that we had carried out, that there were a number of breaches of planning control happening on the site, and they fell into two specific categories. Number one, there was a breach of planning control in respect of how buildings on the site were shown on the approved plans in terms of how they are relative to buildings off the application site. That's in respect of the site plan, the approved site plan, and it's also in respect of the approved site section in terms of the relative heights shown on that site section between buildings on the site and off the site. The second general breach of planning control that we found was in respect of boundary changes along that eastern boundary, and following the commencement of the development, there was a private agreement between the neighbours along that boundary and the developer to essentially take some of the land from within the application site, which had previously been shown as landscaping between the application site and the neighbours, and move that into land, basically part of the neighbour's drive and garden, but I'll come back onto that in a little more detail. The rest of the site, it's important to say, is being built in accordance with the approved plans. So the assessment in front of you is concerned only with those breaches of planning control and the acceptability of those. When committee visited the site in November, they were able to view the development as it stands today. They were able to go onto the site and into the partly constructed buildings on the site and look back at neighbours to the site in terms of those impacts on them. And they were also able to go onto land of the neighbours and into their houses as well to view impacts from within those houses. My presentation is going to walk you through those same sorts of views that you saw on the site visit, and then at the end I'll summarise our conclusions for you from our assessment. So this is the application site outlined in red. It's a sloping site from the west of that plan along Borrens Road, slopes up to the east of the plan in that top corner. The construction access, which you might be been aware of going past along Borrens Road, is actually from Borrens Road on the left hand side of the plan. However, the approved permanent access to the development is going to be along Lake Road, or from Lake Road along Loughrig Avenue and along Loughrig Park, which you can see there. This is the approved site plan, and what you can see from here is that, as well as showing the proposed development, what that plan did was show buildings outside of the site, and those are those grey footprints that you can see with the site itself visible in green rather than white, which is all the land outside of the site. This is the proposed site plan, and we're interested in three specific areas. We're interested in this area here along the boundary. We're interested in these two units here, which are units 1 and 2 on the application site, and they're a pair of semi-detached houses. We're interested in the relationship between those houses and number 16 Loughrig Park, which is this existing bungalow here, and number 16A, this existing bungalow here. We're interested in this building here, which is a block of 4 flats, and we're interested in its relationship between building and number 20 Loughrig Park, which is here. In a general sense, what you can see on there off the application site is buildings outlined in red, and the significance of that is that those outlines in red are the originally plotted locations and sizes of those houses off the application site, and the blue footprints, which you can see, are the now accurately plotted locations and sizes of those houses. And that's particularly relevant when we come to both number 16A, which you can see here, in terms of that difference in terms of where it was originally shown on the proposed plans and where it is in reality, which is the blue footprint, and also in respect of number 20, which, as you can see here, in terms of the red original approved location, and the blue footprint is different both in terms of the shape of the dwelling, but also in terms of the extent to which it lines up with building of flats opposite. This is the approved site section, and I'm going to come back to this in extract. It's important to look at the whole thing just to explain it, but when we look at the detail, I'm going to be using extracts from this. What this site section allowed us to do as part of the original proposal was to assess the impacts of buildings on the site with buildings off the site, and the site section essentially shows the site rising up from a level down by Borrens Road up to the top end on Loughrig Park, and you can see that rising nature of the development. What's not entirely clear from here is that this point here is the point between the application site itself, which is everything in this direction, and off the site, which is these 2 buildings here. And the purpose of this site section, really, because of the tight nature of the development in this top corner, was to show the relationship between units 1 and 2, which I referred to earlier, which is shown on the plan here, that semi-detached pair of houses on the application site, and its relationship with number 16, that bungalow here, and number 16A, the bungalow here. This is a general view of the site as it stands today. In the middle at the top, you can see units 1 and 2. On the left, number 16, and directly in front of you here, the building housing those 4 flats. So to say, what I'm going to do in terms of each of the specific impacts identified and breaches of planning control identified, I'm going to use extracts from the approved plans and the now proposed plans, and I'm going to show you what those differences are. So the approved plan will always be on the left and the proposed plan will always be on the right. So firstly, looking at the relationship between the development and number 16, you can see numbers 1 and 2 here and here on the as approved, and number 16 here off the site. This is the approved and proposed site section, and that's an extract from that larger site section that I showed you before. And the critical thing is that the originally approved site section essentially showed the relationship to us and to committee in terms of assessing impacts, and showed the relationship in terms of height between number 16 here and units 1 and 2 here. And what we have found through our enforcement investigation, through that independent survey, and through the proposed plans that have now been confirmed as accurate, is that height difference between those proposed buildings and the buildings off the site was incorrect. This is the critical plan, and the critical part of this plan is the upper of the dashed red lines. So on the left, you have the as approved plan, and if you keep your eye on the eaves level of number 16 here, and you follow that dashed line through to units 1 and 2 on the application site, you'll see that the eaves level of number 16 was shown as being roughly in line with the top of the windows of units 1 and 2. And if you then look on the right, which is the as built and now as proposed plan, you will see that that same eaves level actually hits somewhat further down the window level of units 1 and 2 at first floor. And that difference there has been calculated through that independent survey as 440 millimetres. These are some views looking at the development as it is today from number 16. You have units 1 and 2 on the left hand side. You have the new boundary wall that you can see there with the fence above it along the boundary, and on the right hand side you can see number 16 and specifically the kitchen window of number 16. This is a view looking back up the drive, and this is the shared drive that number 16, again on the right hand side there, and 16A, which is behind me in this photograph, that's the drive that they share. You can see the new boundary wall, and you can see units 1 and 2 at the back of that photo, and on the left the other parts of the development in this part of the site. This is a view which has been taken from inside number 16, and again specifically from their kitchen window, and this is probably the critical photo in terms of difference and the extent to that 440 millimetre difference between as approved and as now proposed makes, and that would obviously bring both the windows at first floor and the entirety of the development, thinking about it from both an overlooking and overbearing point of view, bring all of those elements down to a point closer to the top of the fence line here, if it had been built as approved. This is a view looking in the other direction and looking at the other parts of the development under construction. Again, you can see the new boundary wall. These are some views from within one of the bedrooms of unit 1 on the application site, and there's 2 or 3 views that I've got here, and this is really to give you an idea, which members were able to see on site, of what the views are like from those units looking back at the houses off the site. This is a general view standing in the middle of the room essentially, and you can see the boundary wall here and fence. You can see number 16 here through this left pane, and specifically you can see the kitchen window of number 16 there. This is a view again from that bedroom window, a bit closer to the bedroom window. You can see number 16 again on the left hand side, number 16A in the background, and the totality of the boundary wall. And finally a view essentially with the camera pressed right up against the window, and that's in terms of view somebody would get standing directly in front of that window with their face pressed against it in effect. This is a view, final view in terms of impacts on number 16, looking back up from ground floor level in the approved garden area, rear garden area of number 16, and you'll see there in terms of the boundary fence and wall that have been erected that there's very little visibility up towards number 16 from that ground floor area. So looking then at impacts on number 16A, as you'll see, the red outline here was the approved location of number 16 in terms of how it was relative to the site, and again the information that we and committee used in their assessment, when in actual fact, in reality, number 16A sits somewhat closer to the gable of these units in the corner of the site, approximately 1 metre closer. This is a view which I've already shown you, but it's specifically from 16A and looks towards the development and along the boundary. You can also see tarmac strip here, which I'll come back to when I talk about the boundary changes in a moment. This is a view looking the opposite direction. This shows that gable to gable relationship with number 16A, which was approved as part of the original application, but which is somewhat closer by the order of a metre in terms of that relationship between those gables. Turning then to the relationship of that flat building, those 4 flats, and how that relates to number 20. Again, you can see the red outline, approved location, and you can see the blue outline of where number 20 actually is in reality. The critical point is that there's essentially a 1.6 metre difference in terms of where number 20 sits on the ground in reality, and therefore in terms of our original assessment, a 1.6 metre difference in terms of the extent to which essentially the front of those flats overlap with the view out from the windows of number 20. This is a general view of that relationship. Number 20 on the left hand side, public road running through the middle, Luffrey Park, and the flats on the right hand side. This is a view from inside number 20, and this shows the flats immediately opposite. The red dashed line here is the approximate location of where that building would have been had that relationship shown on the approved plans being one that had happened in reality or been achievable in reality. And that's that 1.6 metre difference essentially, which, as you see, would mean a somewhat more open outlook from the kitchen window of number 20, and also a somewhat more offset angle of overlooking from those windows. This is a view from one of the upstairs windows of number 20, essentially showing that same view. And this is a view looking back in the opposite direction across the public road from one of the upstairs windows of the flats under construction. And you can see there the downstairs kitchen window from where that photo was taken a moment ago, and upstairs bedroom and bathroom windows of number 20. Finally, then, the breach of planning control in respect of that boundary change, and the important part of these plans is the shaded yellow area here. As you can see on the as approved plan, that area was shown as landscaping within the application site. Following commencement of development, there has been a private agreement between the neighbours to essentially move some of that land into the ownership of the neighbours, and that's in respect of this yellow shaded area along the length of the boundary, which, as you can see, starts out fairly wide at this point, tapers, and then becomes more narrow towards the back end of the site. This is a useful photo, particularly because it had been raining, and you can see the difference in the tarmac, which shows where the original boundary to number 16 and 16A was essentially where the application site boundary was, and you can see the newly erected wall and fence and that wider area at this point in terms of the boundary change, and it tapering off towards the top of the drive. If you're looking in the opposite direction, back down the drive, the width of that boundary change, and a view looking again from the kitchen window of number 16, and you can see in front of the boundary the strip there that's moved from the application site into the ownership of the neighbours. So to summarise for you, conclusions from our assessment and in our report, the as-built development is not what was shown on the approved plans. It's not what we, all the neighbours, expected to see, and the information we used to assess the original application and which committee based their decision on has been shown to have been incorrect in respect of the site plan and the site section. However, the impacts of the as-built development, whilst greater in terms of overlooking and overbearing on 3 of the houses neighbouring the site than indicated by the approved plans, are not considered to constitute an unacceptable level of impact in the terms of Policy 06 or the National Planning Policy Framework. On an assessment of the merits of the scheme before you, we've concluded that the proposals would still ensure a good standard of amenity for neighbours to the site. Boundary changes agreed between the applicant and the neighbours following the commencement of the development have reduced the space available within the housing site for soft landscaping along the boundary with numbers 16 and 16A, consequently reducing the opportunity to mitigate the impacts of the development envisaged by our original assessment. However, if this application were approved, it would still be open to the neighbours to plant soft landscaping on the land they now own and control in order to achieve the same outcomes as the original permission. Taking all of these matters into account, the recommendation is to delegate the Head of Development Management to approve subject to conditions and subject to a new Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Members, do you have any questions for Kevin at this point? Question, Rick? Yeah.
In terms of the landscaping and the change of ownership, is it just the fact that the planting hasn't occurred at the moment that is causing the breach?
The breach is the boundary change itself. The breach is the boundary change itself, and the landscaping hasn't taken place because it's no longer on the application site. It's no longer under the control of the applicant. It's no longer subject to the planning permission, so we have no control over it. That's why it hasn't taken place. Phil.
Thank you, Chair. Kevin, thank you. That was so helpful. Could you just remind me, the developing site is completely correct in relation to itself. It's just not correct in relation to anything that had been built previously. Is that correct?
So, other than in respect of the breaches that we've identified, the development is being carried out in accordance with the approved plans. In terms of the relationship of the development to itself, essentially, within the site boundaries, the buildings are where they are supposed to be in relation to each other. They are the heights that they are supposed to be in relation to each other. As soon as you move off the site, that changes because the approved drawings, site section and site layout plan, show a specific relationship between buildings on the site and off the site, which, because of the plotting of buildings off the site, was not correct. So yes, I think is the answer to your question. It's in accordance with the approved plans in relation to itself.
Kevin, just before we get into public speaking, so condition 12 suggests that if this is approved, there'll be landscaping to be agreed before it proceeds. So that would include the new stretch of driveway.
So essentially, we'd already agreed some landscaping along that strip. That can't now happen. So we would need to revisit.
So the new landscape plan would incorporate something as to be agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
No more questions, members? Right, we shall go into public speaking. So we have quite a bit of public speaking on this one. So members, I have exercised my discretion as chair to grant extra speaking time for this application, and it's rare that I do this. However, there are some situations when we have done this before, particularly when the parish council hasn't had enough time to speak when there's been other people speaking as well. So in this case, we're going to give an extra 5 minutes to the parish council to speak, and then a consequent extra 5 minutes for the applicants to speak should they wish to use that time. So our first speakers will be Mrs. Dixon and Mr. Walker. Do you wish to have the first 5 minutes? And I'm guessing parish council wants to have the second rather than all together. Yeah, 5 and then 5. Okay. So I'll just explain how it works if you've not been here before. So we have public speaking, it's 5 minutes, and you share that between yourselves, and you can start whenever you press the button and start speaking. Daniel operates a timer here, and you can probably see that go down. If you go over the 5 minutes, we'll just sort of very politely interrupt you and say it's finished. So whenever you're ready, if you press the button, you can stand or sit, up to you.
Developers cannot be allowed to obtain planning permission by submitting inaccurate site sections which incorrectly reflect the impact on neighbours, then to submit revised plans for the as-built houses, hoping that you will just wave them through. This has denied proper scrutiny at the planning stage, when planners would have insisted on further excavation of the land to reduce impact or made changes to the height of the dwellings. You can't pass these plans just because the houses have been built. Please stand up for what is fair. Kevin Richards stood in my kitchen months ago and said, "This is not what I expected to see. All I expected you to see was half a bedroom window and a roof." Committee members, you came, you saw that this is not the reality. Houses 1 and 2 have not been built at the levels expected in relationship to our bungalow. The builders, who surely employ professional surveyors, claim that they couldn't access the land outside the site to gain accurate survey information, and they blame the Ordnance Survey maps. This is nonsense and a poor excuse for their breach of planning control. It further brings into question whether the breach was intentional to save excavation costs and alterations to design. Kevin states that the relation of houses to 3 and 4 to 16A Loughry Park is not a breach, as there were no site section drawings provided. The question is, why not? Was it so that the true overbearing impact could not be seen? In conclusion, they cannot be allowed to get retrospective planning permission based on the "it's not that bad really" approach. It is bad. We live here. Whatever Kevin might say, the as-built development has a greater impact on our privacy. We are overlooked into all our living spaces from a greater height, and we are overshadowed by numbers 1 and 2. This is not shown in the original site sections, which could have been challenged. We can't afford to move, but we ask that the application be refused. Failing this, we ask that a fine or a degree of compensation be imposed on the applicants. Otherwise, they and other builders will get the message that they can present inaccurate information and flout their planning permissions without any penalty.
I'm here to speak about the overlooking nature of the newly constructed flats number 39 to 40, which are sited opposite our house, 20 Loughry Park. Originally, the flat windows would have primarily looked into the space between 19 and 20 Loughry Park, but now 20 Loughry Park is far more overlooked than previously expected due to the developer not carrying out a proper location survey of nearby properties. As you will know, you previously approved the location of flats so close to the road that they breached the planning design code by allowing the flat windows to be some 10 feet closer than the minimum distance to our primary windows, kitchen, bedroom and bathroom. I note with interest that the minimum distance recommended between primary windows has been adhered to in respect to the new properties in Tor Place. Why then, as existing residents, should we be subjected to a lower standard? You are being asked to approve the location of the flats as they would have been built some 6 feet nearer to our house than permission was granted for. This has now resulted in our windows directly overlooking our primary windows with overall loss of privacy. This is a total disregard of the planning principles of preventing loss of privacy and minimising impact on existing residents and surely cannot be approved. This whole overlooking situation is being exacerbated to an unacceptable level due to the lack of frontage on the flats. As I see it, there's no opportunity to provide screening on the site for both our and the flat dwellers' benefit. This leaves us with the only option to provide screening ourselves on our land at our expense. If you approve the developer's request for retrospective planning permission, I do think conditions need to be applied requiring the developer to meet the cost of appropriate screening to mitigate the loss of privacy. Your planning policy 06 requires a development not to have an unacceptable impact on the amenity of adjoining residents. This includes visual intrusion, overlooking, overshadowing. It seems to us by recommending you approve the planning application, your officers have not had regard to this policy. From this, I can only conclude that you do not care about the impact of this development on us, the existing residents, and I can only hope that you will care a little more for the existing residents of Loughborough Park in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, before they sit back down, is there any questions? No, thank you very much for your time. If I can ask you to turn to your seats, and can I invite Councillor Donson forward from Lakes Parish Council? Councillor Donson, you've been here before, so it's 5 minutes when you're ready.
Chair, members of the committee, I speak to you today on behalf of the Lakes Parish Council and our local residents who object to this application, which seeks to regulise breaches of planning control after development has already been approved. This is not a minor technical adjustment. It represents a clear departure from the approved plans, affects local amenity, undermines public trust in the planning process, and sets a worrying precedent that planning permission can be altered retrospectively to suit what has been built rather than what was approved. It must worry the committee that when the planning officer visited the site, he agreed with the neighbours that it was not the as-built development that was shown on the approved plans. There are two areas of this application which need serious consideration today. Firstly, following an independent site survey, it has been established that units 1 and 2, a pair of semi-detached houses, are 440 mil higher than the approved plans relative to number 16 Loughborough Park, a bungalow that sits immediately adjacent. A difference of nearly half a metre in height is significant. The increased height results in greater overlooking, loss of privacy, and a materially greater sense of overbearing impact on number 16 than what was assessed when permission was granted. Secondly, we know that number 20 Loughborough Park was inaccurately plotted on the approved plans. It is actually 1.6 metres further to the southeast than originally shown. This is not immaterial. The proximity of nearby dwellings are central to ensuring impact, including privacy, separation distance, overbearing, and visual intrusion. The approved layout does not reflect reality. Had the true location been shown, planners might have reached a different conclusion. The applicant argues that these breaches are simply a result of mapping error. It beggars belief that the developers who employ professional surveyors didn't know about this at the time. Of course, it would have been a significant extra cost to either dig further down on hard rock or change the heights and positions or type of property to meet planning expectations. Approval was granted based explicitly on the relationship between these properties depicted in the approved section drawings. The fact they were wrong prevented residents from commenting appropriately, denying them a proper voice in a process that directly affects their homes and community. Planning decisions depend on accurate, trusted information. If mistakes of this scale are excused after permission is granted, it weakens the integrity and reliability of the entire planning process. It sends a message that permissions are advisory rather than binding. Council members are particularly concerned that if this application is approved, it would reward non-compliance, that the financial position of the developer takes priority of the well-being of local residents and rules can be bent after the fact. This is a message we cannot allow to be sent. If any compromise is to be reached, it must be generally address the community impact, whether through modification to the newly constructed houses or compensation for affected residents. But let me be clear, the priority must be compliance, fairness and protecting the public interest. The public interest is not served if the committee consider these breaches are a matter of so what, is only affecting a very few people and approve. Because to do so will set a precedent that will invite similar breaches, reward non-compliance, harm communities and the environment for years to come, and damage public confidence in the authority's ability to enforce planning control. We ask you to protect the principle of fair, transparent and accountable planning and refuse this application.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Is there any questions, members? Jim.
Thank you very much for your feedback today. Very helpful. What would you anticipate as being a satisfactory resolution to the issues that have arisen?
Well, in terms of financial or
just in general?
Well, I think it needs to be. I think it needs to be noted and marked, and there needs to be some penalty of something to prevent future non-compliance. Because if not, it can happen again. And we have enough problem with enforcement anyway. So I think it's important that there has to be some benefit. Now it's up to whether the developers and the local residents come to a satisfactory sort of conclusion to it. I think there needs to be possibly some financial, because you're not going to knock the houses down.
That was my question.
Yeah,
What's one of the expectations?
Yes, but if you don't do that, I think there needs to be something to just mark the issue.
Okay, thank you.
Just before you go, Councillor Johnson, I'm not aware that there is a legal mechanism for issuing compensation at this stage.
Correct. So the options that are available to us as an authority it's binary. You assess the application. If you find the application to be acceptable on its merits, you grant planning permission for it. If you find the application to be, is that better?
Yeah.
There we go. If you assess the application and you find it acceptable on its merits, you grant it planning permission. If you assess the application and you find it unacceptable on its merits, you refuse it. We would then review taking enforcement action. The breach of planning control is without planning permission, the erection of unauthorised buildings. The remedy would be demolish the buildings in order to resolve the breach of planning control. There is no mechanism open to us to impose a financial penalty. There's no mechanism open to us to impose a fine. The planning enforcement mechanisms are remedial, they're not punitive in that respect. So you're working to resolve the unacceptable breach of planning control. So that is the position. In terms of the current application, you can approve it or you can refuse it. If you refuse it, we'll review the enforcement position. But obviously we'll go through due process, but we'll be in a position where we've got unauthorised buildings and we consider them to be unacceptable. So I would, without prejudice, obviously we'll follow the decision-making process. But I'd say there's a strong likelihood that the outcome of that would be you need to serve an enforcement notice and you need to remove the buildings. But financial penalties not available in law.
If there's no more questions, members, for Councillor Johnson, can I ask you to return to your seat? Thank you very much. So we've got a final spot of speaking for this item is Mrs. Bellwood, who's the applicant's representative. So you've been here before, but this time you've got up to 10 minutes, should you wish.
I hadn't pressed the button. You'd think I'd know that. I could see a light. Good morning, councillors. Thank you first to the officers for a very fair report and assessment, which points out the impacts in a very succinct manner, and for carrying out what I understand was a very detailed site visit with members. I can understand the frustration of the community when plans change or things aren't quite right. It's never ideal, and it's not a situation the applicants wish to be in. As has already been confirmed, the on-site position of all the houses is correct. The applicants have tried hard to work with local residents with ongoing dialogue, land exchange, etc. But where things are not right, they have been happy to submit an application and follow the correct process today to ensure that everyone has the right, as they have done today, to make their concerns known, to speak to you all and let you know their concerns. The difficulty here is that the houses, which are nearly completed affordable units, are built correctly, as I've said, as per their own individual plans. They all have, in that bottom corner next to 16A, the same eaves height, the same windows height. So that group of houses is all consistent with each other. It is simply one of 4 cross sections which was wrong, and it affects just 2 new builds and the rest are correct. We accept there was an error, but it was not intentional. Until the court case that Kevin has referred to came to light, it was a well understood rule of planning that any off-site buildings shown on plans were treated as indicative only. It's why planners and decision makers carry out site visits, so the assessment is not done on plans alone. Usually that site visit would catch any obvious errors with plans or mapping. I think here the fact that no one picked up that the OS maps used for the site plan was incorrect shows how marginal in planning terms this change is in many respects. Even the neighbours' own planning applications have used this same OS map. Everyone has to use OS-based maps for their location plans. That's a validation criteria set by the government. We cannot use our own plans. We have to use OS. And I'll say in 25 years I've been doing this, this is the only time I've known OS to be wrong. This is super rare, but we're here to try and address it. But again, it's not deliberate. I would also say that it's commonplace on large development sites that things do change through the process. Things happen on site, materials become unavailable, you hit a layer of bedrock, you discover badger. These things happen, and there is a planning process that allows both retrospective applications and amendments to application. That's legal and correct, and we're going through the correct process. I understand the community's concerns that plans change, but that is commonplace on housing developments, especially where there's multiple houses. With regard to the height, it is 44 centimetres or 17 inches in old money, a measurement that would in fact have been very difficult to work out precisely on the small scale plans that were submitted and approved. Scaling from those plans that were given cross section to any accuracy is nearly impossible. We do have the exact measurements now, and it is a bit taller. But truthfully, the overlooking from the windows remains largely the same. Whether new occupiers look out the bottom, the middle, the top, the right or the left of the window, the amount of overlooking is the same. People do not stand at a window and look straight ahead. They turn their heads. So the general amount of overlooking is the same. Yes, the massing will be larger, but the roof does slope away from 16A and you've got some overhang and shadowing. So yes, it is a change. It's different. But as the report points out, it would not have been so bad originally if this was shown to warrant a refusal, given the existing driveways, the land levels, the relationships and the context. The plans still meet required standards. And I know neighbours have been concerned about construction. They haven't mentioned it today, but I take note of their concerns that they raised in writing. And we accept construction sites are noisy. That causes disturbance, but there has been dialogue between the applicants and the neighbours to try and minimise this where possible. The works are nearly complete, especially next to the neighbours, and that is important as well. Regarding the boundary, this was a solution amicably worked out with the neighbours to give them space, not to avoid conditions. The enforcement rules are a peculiarity set by legislation and not the applicants, so it shouldn't be held against them that they now can't carry out the landscaping. But as has been said, anybody could carry out the landscaping. The neighbours could carry out the landscaping themselves. And having been doing this again for a number of years, the ability for the objectors, for the neighbours to put in their own landscaping, gives them control over it. Long term, they can put in their own landscaping and they can protect and maintain it as they need. There is always a limitation to landscaping on a neighbour's site, on a development site, that might only be in place for say 5 years, depending on the condition, or it may be changed. So there is a potential advantage. Also, the new occupiers, the housing association, could also put landscaping in if they felt it was needed. But it's important to consider that this is not an application considering the whole housing scheme again. It is only the 3 differences set out in the report between the approved and the as-built position. And we very much hope that you accept that this was not a deliberate error. The applicants have taken this on the chin and have worked with neighbours and the planners to try and bring this to the correct place where everyone can make their views known. And we hope that you will be able to support the officer's recommendation to approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? No. Well, thank you very much. So, members, we are into our discussion part of the item. So, just go through a few things. Obviously, it's not. We're not considering the whole site, all the housing. It's just those aspects that are materially different from the original application. So, what was granted, it can't be built really because of the actual original one just can't be built. So, we are considering the difference from the original application. So technically they are unauthorised buildings. Who'd like to start us off on the discussion? Peter.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Kevin, for a very detailed and thorough report. And also thank you for organising the site visit for us, which was a long site visit and enabled us to visit the key properties affected and stand in both the neighbours' properties and the new builds. And I think that was really, really very useful. I think it is worth just reiterating again what you said, Mark, that what we are looking at today is not the whole application. It is the breaches and the impact that they have on the amenity of the neighbours. And it was useful to hear the public speaking on both sides today. So thank you for your contributions. And while it is easy to see the impact of the properties as built on the neighbours' amenity, what we are looking at today is the difference between what we approved a few months ago and what is as built. And as you said, Mark, what was approved by us cannot be built. So what we're considering is whether the impact of the variations in permission are causing a significant detriment to what we approved. And what I would point out in terms of the dimensions of change, with reference to number 16, the difference in as-built height is 440 millimetres. For context, my laptop is 220 millimetres. So we're talking about a difference in as-built height of twice the height of my laptop. And I think what we were able to see on the site visit was what that difference looks like when we were standing in the 2 different properties. And that was very, very useful. With regards number 20, the difference is 1.6 metres. And in our consideration today, again, we are thinking, are those 2 differences of such a significant level to what we had already approved a few months ago that we should refuse this application? And it was very interesting to be on those sites and to see the difference between the building here, looking at it from the neighbour's window, and what it would be 1.6 metres the other way, or 440 millimetres in that way. And my experience of seeing those differences, I do not think that they are of such a material difference to warrant refusal of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Jim.
Thank you, Mark. This is the only time in my time on the planning committee that we've been on 2 site visits. So I think that reflects the sensitivity of this decision. And I know it's taken us a lot of thought on the original application. So and thank you to Kevin's contribution in terms of the reports and to everyone who's spoken today. It's been really helpful. I've looked at this in a mind of what would have impacted if this had been clear when we did our first site visit. And when I look at Peter's point of the 440 millimeters, I don't think we would have understood that would have made any difference. I don't think we were looking at that level of sensitivity when we did our site visit. And with the kind of permission of the neighbours getting that view and then going into the buildings, I actually felt that change in levels had actually changed the alignment slightly and meant there was less overlooking because you weren't closer to the alignment window to window, you're actually looking slightly up. So I don't think that's material enough that would have changed my original decision to support development. The boundary, it's always a shame to lose a bit of green space, but it did give the affected properties a bit more space. And I think the wall, Rick made this point on our visit, was within permitted development rights because of the size of it. So I'm not worried about the boundary changes. The one I do feel is most material is the impact on 19 and 20 in terms of the angle of the window. I am conscious the upstairs flat though has a nice view down out of the flat, so the tendency won't be to look at the property opposite but look at the view. The downstairs flat probably hasn't got quite the same view, although we didn't go into it. Having said that, I'm not sure we understood it to that level of detail and it was material enough at the time for me to have changed my mind. So overall, sorry, I'll come up with one final thing, because we are delegating to you, Andrew, for permission. I would ask, in my mind, that you look at an additional condition to see if we can do some screening for 19 and 20, even if it's on their properties. When I looked at the picture, it did look possible to screen the lower flat without greatly impacting on the light. There's a better picture somewhere that brings it out quite nicely. Picture from inside the kitchen, Kevin, of looking there, that one. It struck me that potentially there could be a condition to provide some screening this side of the road that would prevent the lower flats being able to look, and it would to an extent reduce this side. If the homeowner of that's number 20, we're in there, isn't it? Is that number 20? Yeah. So an offer from a condition for the developer to offer some sort of screening, to pay for some sort of screening there, which is what I think I also heard some of the people requesting. And we could screen the lower window, I would have thought, which would reduce some of the impact. But Andrew, I'd happy to leave that with you too.
No, sorry, I need to just get clear firstly what the ask is. So a condition could deal with the provision of landscaping within the application site. The question then would be whether you can achieve what you want through landscaping in that position. You could secure planting, but obviously you can't require that planting is maintained at or above a particular height. The new occupant could just go in and remove it. The alternative would be, well, not remove it, but maintain it, because there are provisions for replacement, but you can't achieve a particular height and require a particular height in perpetuity. The alternative would then be, if you have a particular height in mind, is that you would need a fence or a wall in that position. The alternative would be off-site, but you can't, I'm not sure we can require that because the applicant does not have control over neighbouring land.
And I think it needs to be off-site because it would be too close to the window if it's on-site. But it was really,
yeah.
I'm
not sure a condition would allow it off-site. We'd be looking at some sort of obligation thing.
So obligation is the key word. So we require a planning obligation here because it's a Section 73 application, so it's retrospective. So we need to secure the affordable housing and the local occupancy elements again through the obligation, because they don't. It's a different type of application. So you can secure the payment of monies through an obligation. If that is what you would like me to do, I need really, really clear guidance as to the amount and the reason and what it is that is unacceptable, that could only be made acceptable. I would be exceptionally uncomfortable, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, being told, Andrew, go away and negotiate some sort of settlement as part of the obligation. I can't do that, because I don't know whether I'm achieving what you require.
I understand that, and that's why it makes it very difficult. And maybe that's too difficult to achieve, Mark.
Mr. Walker, quickly.
On my to help both us and obviously the overlooking from the flats, and the resounding answer was no.
No, okay.
But I don't know whether you can have a 106 in old.
We have to first identify harm, whether the committee would want to address that harm through a unilateral obligation, a legal agreement. Jim, your thoughts, because you're proposing it. I don't hear anything from the others yet.
Sorry, I don't think it would have materially changed our view on the visit. I don't think we were looking at that thinking, is it a metre this way or a metre that way? It just struck me as an opportunity to try and reduce the impact of the variation, but clearly that doesn't look possible.
Yeah, so I think just to be clear, I guess the question that you're essentially going to be asking yourselves is, would I have approved this first time round? And if the answer to that is yes, then that fails to meet the tests of an obligation or a condition. If the answer to this would be no, unless, then that is where the obligation steps in. If you can secure X to make it acceptable.
Yeah, and I think the advice is helpful. Thank you, because I'm in a place where I would have said that I would have expected. So it's back to the original question and the point I was coming to in summary. When I look at all three things, if I'd have seen those when we'd had the original decision, I would have still been happy to agree the site. And so therefore, on that basis, Mark, I'm happy to propose we go with Kevin's recommendation on this.
Okay, thanks, Jim. So where we are as a committee, we can't get into negotiating between parties. We either accept it or refuse it, and we can sometimes impose conditions if we can want to mitigate the harm. So we've got a proposal, Andy.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, we're still discussing. Yeah. We haven't got a seconder yet.
So the distance in height is 2 block courses, basically 18 inches, 9-inch blocks. It'll be. I don't know whether they're going to be stone, how they're going to be finished. I'm just looking at them, but it's 2 block courses. So to have 2 block courses less probably would mean they wouldn't be built to building regs because they wouldn't have headroom inside. Should they have dug deeper? Possibly. Did they hit bedrock? Possibly. A lot of the distances seem to be with the inaccurate drawings and the OS maps, if that's what it was. But the 2 buildings, 20 and 16A, I know we're not discussing their build, but were they built to planning as well? Because they're different shapes, different set. So did they use the planning? There would be planning documents for them originally when they were built. Were they built to plan, or were they built to what was submitted? Because that makes a difference. I know we're not discussing them, but if they were built in the wrong place.
So there's no issue or consideration about the position of the neighbouring properties. The
So
neighbouring properties are long established.
They were built
They
as
are
plans were.
they're lawfully
Yeah,
respected.
yeah. So they were built as plans were. It's just they were drawn wrong on these new plans.
So
That's
so
it.
the neighbouring properties are undoubtedly lawful. That's it. They are where they are. They're entitled to be there. That's a fact beyond dispute.
Mm.
The applicant on a planning permission is required to build in accordance with all plans and conditions. And the plans that were submitted included sections and included site layouts, and that was secured through the conditions, and you are required to conform with all aspects of those. And what the case law tells us is that if you show a relationship to a neighbouring property within your application on a plan, that is then secured through the permission, and you cannot achieve that. You cannot build out that building, which is what we see here. So we now find ourselves with following the process, which is the retrospective application. Two possible outcomes: approve it or refuse it. And in my mind, the question for you is, would we have approved this first time around? And then the last thing I'd say is, planning is binary. So as I say, you can approve it or refuse it. So there will just come a point where that little bit more trips you from acceptable to unacceptable. So just bear that in mind, that it doesn't have to be a big step necessarily for you. You don't have to go, oh, it's meters and meters and meters. It could just be that little bit more, because all you can do is approve it or refuse it. And so at some point, you'll just add that little bit more and it'll go from being fine to not being fine. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, so it's, to me, it's whether the applicant then drew the houses wrong, the 16A and 20, to achieve them spaces, or not.
I think they've gone off the old OS map, which is wrong. So it must have been from like aerial photography or something, and it's just gone wrong, and they've assumed it was right. I think that's where it's come from. That's the explanation. Rick.
I mean, following from that point, we've quoted one example of case law. Speaking on behalf of the developer, reference was made to the long accepted tradition or culture within planning that drawings showing buildings outside of the site was shown as illustrative and not cast in stone. I think we've got to be cautious about just blindly accepting one piece of case law that says, hey, this is wrong, because it's a judgment, as you've referred to. And I don't think there was any malice or intention on anyone's part to do anything wrong. I would question the case law. I wouldn't just fall back and say, oh, one person said, therefore it must be right, when loads of others have said differently. So I think that, and it ultimately it comes down to the fact that would we have allowed it if this is what they'd applied for? And that's the key to it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just coming back to the picture that we have in front of us. Had I been on the first site visit and had I been a member of the authority then, had you been able to show me that indicative picture? Is it are the two windows of sufficient distance apart that it wouldn't have troubled us at all? What? Just remind me, is there a legal obligation to have the distance between two windows a certain distance?
There's a distance in the design code of 20 metres between, or 19 metres between two primary windows, which is what these would be. This is somewhat less than that. It's 17, I think 17 and a bit metres. So it's less. I think from our point of view, the design code is there to guide us in these types of situations. It's not absolute. And I think in this particular case, what we did was look at the relationship between the two buildings, the public road in between, the general street scene, the public nature of that, and decided that marginally reduced distance was acceptable.
But I will come back. I'm so sorry, Kevin. If number 20 had been in the place that the ordnance survey said it was, would it have been more than 70?
The distance in terms of that front to back relationship is the same. It's in the same place in terms of where the windows sit.
Any other members, Peter?
There's no other comments from members. I'm happy to second Jim's proposal. But before we go to vote, I would just like to just reiterate what I said at the beginning, that I think we've made 2 site visits to this site. We've had a really detailed report from Kevin. We've had a significant discussion today, and we've allowed extra public speaking, which we rarely do. So if we do vote to approve this, I know that it isn't what the neighbours and objectors would want, but I think we have given this a very good and detailed assessment, and I think that's important to note.
Yeah, so you wish to second? Yeah. I mean, this is an interesting case because of that case law. If this was 5 years ago, we probably wouldn't be here at committee with this necessarily. Any other comments or questions, members, before we go to the vote? No, we've got a proposal from Jim Jackson, seconded by Peter Walter, that we grant permission as per officer's report. We delegate to the head of development management to grant. All those in favour? All those against? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5 in favour and 1 against.
That's granted. Thank you very much, members. Members, I suggest a 10-minute break, and then we'll be coming back for our next application, which is number 4, Daleview Farm. Yeah, back at just after 20 past, please. Welcome back, everybody. We're ready for our next planning application to consider, and that's number 4 on our list, and that's Dale View Farm at Underbarrow, and Emma has come to tell us all about this one.
Thank you, Chair. The application site comprises 3 new build dwellings in Underbarrow that were granted planning permission in 2020, subject to a local occupancy condition. The dwellings are currently being marketed but remain unoccupied, and so the applicant is seeking planning permission for the variation of that local occupancy condition. 1, to bring the locality in line with the 2023 adopted housing SPD, or supplementary planning document, and secondly, to extend the locality to include whole parishes where they bisect the national park boundary, and to include the words working from home or similar in the condition wording. This application is before you today because of the representations received by Underbarrow and Bradleyfield Parish Council, and because of the issues which the proposals raise for our housing policies and our approach to local occupancy restrictions. The local occupancy condition imposed on the 3 dwellings in 2020 was in accordance with the development plan in force at the time. That was the 2010 core strategy and the 2014 housing provision planning document. The geographic locality defined in that condition includes the green area of this map. And since planning permission was granted in 2020, a new development plan has been adopted, which includes the 2021 local plan and the 2023 housing supplementary planning document. In that, the geographic locality would be applied to the new dwellings has been expanded to include a greater number of parishes. So this now includes both the green, all the green. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, we're just trying to illustrate the difference in the area. So the planning permission as granted will take its locality essentially to the east of Windermere, plus this, which is Lakes Parish, this enormous one at the top. The SPD as it now stands, if you were granting a permission that was SPD compliant today, would impose a local occupancy which was all of the green area, so both east and west of the lake. So the planning permission that's granted restricts to parishes essentially to the east of Windermere plus lakes. Hopefully that's clear.
So yeah, to include greater number of parishes to include that whole green area. We support the extension of the locality to bring it in line with the adopted SPD, and we consider that would provide an opportunity for the applicant to test the market further. The applicant also seeks to extend the locality into the whole parishes where the parish is bisected by the national park boundary. I have shown these parishes on this map where they are located within the boundary of the national park. So they've shown the names and the red dots there. I've also shown there the approximate extent to which they would extend beyond the national park boundary, with those red lines. So Strickland Roger and Strickland Kettle, that would extend into the settlement of Burneside, and around Levens would extend into the settlement of Levens. The current development plan aims to meet housing needs of the national park and requires local occupancy conditions that are tied to geographical areas. These localities form their own local market housing areas, which are informed by strategic level evidence carried out by housing authorities, which reflect local circumstance, which is distinct from wider neighbouring authority areas. Whilst the current housing SPD does allow extension beyond the national park boundaries, where there is reasonable justification, we consider that the application in front of us does not provide this. We don't consider that the application submission addresses the lack of interest from those that do comply with the local occupancy condition, and therefore we do not support this element of the proposal. The applicant also seeks planning permission to include working from home in the condition wording. Adding the seemingly simple words to the condition, we consider would introduce a degree of ambiguity to the condition, which does not currently exist at present, and would fail the test of precision and enforceability. We considered there to be scope in the current condition to allow working from home, where the occupant is in continuous employment in the locality as a consequence of that working from home, and do not support the addition of the requested wording. So in summary, whilst we support one element of the requested variation, we recommend refusal of the whole application based on the further two requests. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Emma. Members, any questions? No. We have some public speaking. We have Mr. Perry and Mr. Cunliffe, who are the applicant's representatives. So you've seen it all before, but you've got 5 minutes to share between yourselves as you see fit. We'll start the timer whenever you start speaking. If you could just press the microphone button when you're ready to go.
Thank you. Adam Page, Stevenson Halliday, Planning Director. Thank you for your time this morning. Emma has addressed the first point I was going to raise there in terms of the acceptability of the South housing market area. I would just add, in addition to that, in accordance with prevailing planning guidance, it is open to members to choose to permit the application subject to an alternative condition where this would overcome the need to refuse the application outright. It's relevant to some of the other things I'm going to say. It's our argument, though, that this will not address the issue that has led to the application, and that is the inability to sell the properties. The planning application sets this out in detail, and I'll summarise the pertinent points now. The applicant is supportive of the principle and the delivery of local occupancy housing, hasn't engaged in the inherently risky process and exercise of developing housing to meet this need. The specific circumstances of the case are that permission was granted in 2020 under the previous local plan in different socio-economic circumstances. The properties are in a deeply rural area. They are substantial in size, and due to these factors, which in practical terms means they are remote from financial and commodity markets, the dwellings were and would always be relatively expensive to construct and therefore purchase. It's worth me adding at this point that we were not involved in the submission of the original application. Those are my observations today. The inability to sell the properties over a prolonged period of time is putting the applicant under very real financial strain and personal stress. The applicant has engaged a professional RICS surveyor and valuer to assist in understanding the issue. They have undertaken a marketing review submitted with the application. This has concluded that price itself is not the key issue. It is the impact of the condition affecting the ability of potential occupiers to access borrowing and legal advice, advising against the purchase of the properties due to the risk and that combination of factors. Unfettered properties of a similar size and location are routinely selling. It's clear today, therefore, that the permission, and more precisely the condition, is not serving a useful planning purpose. This is because the properties, which are capable of occupation by people living, working and using services within the national park, lay empty. There are very real challenges related to selling large local occupancy restricted dwellings in a location like Underbarrow, where the number of potential occupants is very small. This pool is smaller still when the cost of property, the cost of the property to build and then purchase is also factored in. In preparing and submitting this application, in officers granting permission for the development and then in constructing the dwellings in a compliant manner, all parties have acted in good faith. The application presents evidence to confirm that these properties have been professionally and fairly marketed for a substantial period of time. In these circumstances, it would be unreasonable to insist upon this exercise on continuing indefinitely. To address the issues of occupancy restricted properties laying empty, we encourage members to vary the condition, to broaden it and to allow properties to be occupied in accordance with the wider housing market area as it exists today. Across those parishes dissected by the national park boundary, which is primarily a landscape designation. It doesn't reflect housing needs, service provision or employment prospects, but also, and in response to officers' comments in their report around precision, to include self-employed people working from home. Figures today suggest that up to 14% of the population in the UK works from home. This is a significant opportunity area for this authority to bolster its rural economy and attract new economically active residents. I will just stop there, Ben, and I'll let you pick up.
That's fine. I'm Ben Cunliffe, the architect. I'm here to primarily answer any questions you have. However, I'd like to reiterate, the developer has provided 3 homes in a setting close to Kendal in accordance with the National Park's design guidance. These homes have been built to a high standard with traditional chimneys, stone facing and slate mined in Cumbria in accordance with the quality that the park demands. The houses have been built to a high level of sustainability. They have extremely good high quality U-value windows, air source heating and MVHR heat recovery. The applicant has been conscientious and diligent in procuring the approved scheme compliant with regulatory standards.
Thank you, Mr. Cunliffe. You didn't get quite what you're hoping for, but that's the 5 minutes up.
Okay.
Before you go, members, any questions? Peter.
Thank you, Mark. One quick question. You say the price is not the issue. Have you marketed the properties at a reduced price?
No, they've been marketed at a fair price, and that's been confirmed by H&H as a local company, but they're professional advisors who've concluded that it's a reasonable price, all things considered in terms of cost, location.
When you say reasonable price, is that taking full account of the occupancy condition, and what's the value without the occupancy condition?
I don't have the difference. I can't give you 2 figures today, but yes, that the properties are for sale and they take account of the impact of a local occupancy restriction.
I think the point that I wanted to get, when the application was approved in 2020, I think we're all aware that the world was a very different place to what it is now, and building costs have more than doubled in the last 5 years since COVID. And the applicant has behaved responsibly in thinking that they had a development which was within the bounds that was commercially reasonable at the time.
Bill, did you have your hand up to ask? No. Right, that's all questions. Thank you, chaps. We could, if I can ask you to return to your seats. So, members, we're into the discussion. So this application is an amendment, I believe, to change the occupancy condition to the approved houses, or a variation of condition application. Who wants to start us? Rick.
I always struggle with the concept that somebody who lives in a parish can't be defined as being local if they want to buy a house in the parish simply because they live on the other side of the road or a boundary. If you live in the parish, to my mind, you must be local, and it's a nonsense to say differently. So what is the good reason for not allowing somebody from the other side of that line live in a local occupancy house? I don't understand it. And I'm not sure the report explains it. It just said, oh, we won't talk about that because that's...
Yeah, well, it's a question. I suppose you've got to draw the line somewhere, but I'll let you answer, Andrew.
Yeah, so the policy starting point is about meeting existing unmet need in the national park. So that's where the distinctive areas come from. As Mr. Perry said, the national park boundary is a landscape designation. It's not a socio-economic designation, but it is the boundary that we use as the starting point. The SPD then affords opportunity for variation where there is sufficient justification to do so. The question here is whether you think there is sufficient justification which has been advanced in terms of what you've heard around price. Our view is not, and that You know, you start with the policy, you start with the SPD. If you're going to do something different to policy, that should be justified. We don't think the justification has been advanced, but that's a matter of judgment.
Peter.
Thank you, Mark. You say that the justification hasn't been, you haven't seen reasonable justification for the change. Can you suggest what would be reasonable justification?
So in terms of the justification, I think there's two things. The first thing is that the properties, we are being asked to do something beyond the normal policy starting point. The properties aren't currently at the normal policy starting point. They're below that. So question one, could the policies be brought up to current SPD compliance? Yes, they could. We're not there yet, and that I think is what Mr. Perry was pointing out, that in terms of the options for members, although you have a recommendation of refusal in front of you, it is open to you to approve the application as it has been proposed, or to put forward an alternative condition. So you could, for instance, go, let's approve this subject to something that is SPD compliant. So that's the first thing. They're not in a policy compliant position now, and as far as we can tell, they've not been marketed at that, have they? The second point then is about price, and as is set out in the report, and is set out in the SPD. Price isn't really price. How can I put this? The issue around viability is around delivery. That's where viability kicks in. Are we going to deliver those properties? But once a developer has taken a commercial risk and the property is being delivered, if the commercial risk doesn't pay off, the planning system isn't there in a position to help them recover that, essentially.
I would strongly suggest that the local planning authority is at fault for allowing something that is to be built that is so expensive that you can't reasonably expect it to be occupied.
I think what I'd say to that is that these are not affordable homes. These are local occupancy homes. The policies do not seek to regulate their price. They don't seek to regulate their value, but they do restrict the pool of people.
So the original planning application would have been for houses of a certain size, which were approved, and because our policies say new homes have to have occupancy conditions, they had an occupancy condition put on them. So I suppose we're not necessarily in a position where we have to work out if it's going to be profitable for a developer or not. It's really up to the developer. If that size isn't right, maybe something else would have been done. Jim.
Thank you, Mark. Quite conflicted on this one for a few reasons. I believe our policy is to provide local housing for local population, and come back to Rick's point, it does feel that we've got some very expensive properties here, but that decision's been made, that boat sailed. So we've got 3 homes that are not being occupied that could provide housing within the park. So starting with that point, I'm very conscious that if any decision we might make might undermine our planning policy and might result in lots more big expensive houses being built in the park, because people think, oh, we'll come back later on and get the policy decisions changed, and that's a really big worry in my mind. But that's potentially something we could address earlier in the planning process if it was a worry. So I think taking each decision in turn, working from home, I think that's implicit in what lots of people do. I'm sure across lots of local occupancy houses, people are working from home. So I'm not convinced there's a need to change our policy and add that. I think that's implicit in it. I'm very happy that we update to the latest planning document. So I think I'm very happy with that condition. And I think we could do that today, and that would give an opportunity to extend the catchment for another opportunity. The question that's just going through my mind is this parish question, which is a policy question, which I have raised previously about my concern that will limit the opportunity to bring fresh people into the park. Economically active people, I think, was the statement earlier, and that we need to discuss separately over a separate timescale. But we've got some substantial properties just outside Kendal. I know many people who live in that vicinity, which I know quite well, consider themselves right on the doorstep of Kendal, and it seems bizarre that they're barred from buying it. But I think even these changes wouldn't extend to Kendal, would they, Andrew? No, so we're still excluding that. My inclination is to agree to go to the whole parish model, to the new updated SPD and the whole parish model, reluctantly and begrudgingly, but we do have 3 homes sitting empty. And to ignore the working from home, because I think that's covered and was covered in the report. So that's where I am in my thinking.
Just to get that clear, Jim, when you say new parish model, do you mean going from central and southeast area, which is a bit on the right of the green, right of Windermere Lake, to include the south distinctive area, or are you saying include the red bits?
So I'm doing 2 things.
Yeah.
So proposal 1 is to update to the SPD. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah, so that's all green.
Yeah, we should just do that because that seems fair and reasonable. And we ought to consider that as a policy for the future, Andrew, that we track that. And applications are always going to be caught during change, and we should make sure that for the future we have a way of managing that if properties fall across that boundary. Begrudgingly and very reluctantly, I'm suggesting we extend to the red boundaries as well on this occasion.
Okay.
Is that clear, Mark?
Yeah, please no.
Yes, and maybe further, it's what you're saying there, Jim, that we're discussing approving something different. I've just got a bit confused.
I think
sorry.
I can't see. Sorry, my machine keeps.
There's 3 things we've been asked for this application to include a sentence about self-employment from home, to include adding the whole green area rather than just part of the green area, and to include those red bits as well. So Jim has suggested read the whole green area, the red bits, but not the employment bits.
Correct.
The employment sentence.
Thank you, Mark.
So technically counted to the recommendation, yeah. Anyone else? Rick?
Yeah, I would second that. I mean, it strikes me that it's bizarre that you can't be defined as local if you live in the parish. The only thing that concerns me in terms of meeting the demand, the need to have the houses occupied, is whether there's anybody who lives in them red bits.
Quite low population, some of those red bits. Was yours a proposal, Jim?
So let's be clear, yes. I'm proposing we agree option 1 and option 2, but we don't agree number 3.
Right, and seconded by Rick. Okay, right. Before we go to that, we'll go around the tables. Phil.
Thank you. So just remind me what we're not doing is we're not opening up these houses as an open market home. What we're doing is we're saying that people who live in Greyrig, Winfell, and all those sorts of areas, they could be eligible for these local occupancy homes.
Yeah. Anything in green and the red bits, you can move into that part of Underborough. Yeah. So
for 900,000.
If you're on the other side of Greyrig Road, you would be eligible. Yeah. And if you were to go with
so it would increase their market
by a few thousand people.
What it would also do, Phil, in my mind, is it would mean that they're probably moving out of a less valued property into a higher value property, and it would put a lower value property back on the market in our locality, albeit unfettered.
Peter.
Can I just check why this is before DCC? Because it's the parish councils object, the officers are objecting. And the other reason you're saying is because of the potential implications on our policies. Can you just reiterate the implications if we go against recommendations?
It's because it's before members because of precisely the conversation that you've had, and I think it's a conversation that you probably have wanted
So under delegated powers, it could have gone to delegation because there's only 4 households. Our limit is 5 households before it has to come to committee. However, Andrew and the team have brought it here because
Could you please reiterate the implications for other future applications and other issues?
As the recommendation stands, fairly limited, extending out to the SPD area, straightforward enough, policy compliant, including those areas beyond, notwithstanding what's in the application, members in their own mind based on the local circumstances are satisfied that that is justified. So you're not stepping away from policy there, and the aspect of opening it up essentially to anybody who works from home, we're not going there, so we haven't got consequences in that respect. So limited. Right. Where I am, for what it's worth, I'm fairly protective of the occupancy condition. The idea of the occupancy condition is basically to try and limit the numbers of people who can occupy these houses so that you can allow people of local connection to stay here, and that tends to lower the price a bit. So people who are working locally and perhaps don't have the higher paying jobs that people coming into the area might have, or the amount of money, might be able to afford somewhere to live, and that's the idea of the occupancy conditions. Obviously on these larger houses, those kind of people often can't apply to obtain them anyway because of the high prices. So I'm fairly protective, of keeping it as it is. However, we do have a proposal from Jim and seconded by Rick that we grant permission without the employment aspect of it, or we delegate. Should we delegate? No, it's quite clear to me that it would be to grant permission subject to an occupancy condition, which in terms of the parishes aligned with the current SPD list and included whole parish areas where parishes in that list are bisected by the park boundary.
So it's
quite clear.
Okay. So as per what Andrew said, so we'll go for the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's passed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 1 against. Okay, thank you very much, members. That's passed. Our next one is number 5. Thank you, Emma. And we are going to the Swan Hotel in Grasmere. And Jackie's going to come along and tell us about this one. This one has been before committee before. You all remember?
Good morning, members. Swan Hotel at Grasmere. Previous application was before you in May of this year for the lighting details for this staff accommodation block. So today, as expressed last time, we are considering the lighting details at first floor level only and on the stairs only. And the details are submitted under condition 9 of the original 2018 planning permission. The application is reported to you today as you've previously refused the details, and I'll show you some photographs that illustrate this. So the site is located on the east side of the A591 road on the northern side of Grasmere, as shown on the location plan here. The aerial photograph illustrates the location of the staff accommodation block in the red line. You'll note the fields to the north of the site, but the aerial also illustrates the level of other built developments in the immediate area to the site. The block plan here shows the site in relation to its immediate neighbours. On the opposite side of the road, we have Belfoot and then Elderbeck, and the owners of Elderbeck are here to talk to you today. So moving on to the details. This is the first floor lighting and fire alarm plan. It shows with the linked blue lines the locations of the wall mounted lights. So there's 3 to each landing and 2 to each staircase. The fire alarm units are located at each corner of the building at the tops of the stairs where you've got the lighter blue and the red dot. So what are the lights like that we're looking at now? And this slide shows the light units proposed. They're small light units, they're round, they've got the half cowl on the top, they're 180 millimetres in diameter, and they've got a diffuser sort of opaque glass on them. And these lights are fitted 500 millimetres above the floor level on the landing and the stairs. And the fire sign are ceiling mounted as shown in the photograph. So the wall lights are triggered individually as you walk up the stairs and along the landings, and each light will only be on for 5 seconds at a time. And I've got a video to illustrate this for you. And the fire signs emit a low green glow in the hours of darkness, but they are set at non-maintained, so they only illuminate, the bright lights on them only illuminate if the fire alarm is activated. So they only illuminate in case of emergency. For the wall mounted lights, the bulb specification is here, 1800 kelvins and 80 lumens. And this gives a warm orange light, whereas you might remember the lighting before was quite a bright white light. So the lighting scheme as now proposed has already been fitted to 1/4 of the building. We're therefore able to readily assess the impact of the proposed lighting on the wider landscape and in residential amenity terms. So I now have a series of photographs and videos of the lighting as proposed and how it impacts on the wider landscape. And actually, this first video illustrates that the lights are now individually controlled. I'll play it in a second, by separate sensors. Members should note that in taking this video, the torch on my phone was accidentally on. So it doesn't actually show the light level, but it shows how they are operated. And one of them also needs to be adjusted. So we're going up the stairs. That one was already on. We're getting towards the top light. That one's just come on. And we're going to walk along the landing. So I've triggered that one. I've triggered this one. And I've triggered the end one. And I'm going to turn around, look back, and you'll note that the other 2 wall lights have gone off. That one at the end needs adjusting, but then they're triggered when I walk back again. So each light is only on for a very short time. So where are we with the lighting at this site? This photograph illustrates the ground floor lights, which were already approved and are not therefore part of this application. So what you see there is the baseline for our assessment. That is all approved. This next photograph shows the previously refused lighting on the walkway on the left-hand side of the building at first floor levels. At that time, members were concerned of the brightness and the fact that the light bounced off the white walls. You said that the light should be a warm coloured light. The level of lighting was unnecessary. Your ambition was that it should not be visible from outside of the site, and you required a significantly lower level of lighting. So this next video, which I'll play in a second, illustrates the proposed lighting that has been installed on the left-hand side of the building, which is in darkness at the moment. Note that the refused lights are on the right-hand side, so you've got a bit of comparison. So there's somebody just walking up the stairs at the side of the building. They've triggered one light. They've triggered 2 lights. They've triggered 3 lights, and the one at the left-hand side has gone off. So you can see they're individually operated, and you can see that the light levels are relatively low. I now consider that this proposed lighting is very low key and it's in accordance with the lighting plan, and I consider it does not result in any harmful or unacceptable change to the character and appearance of the area in landscape terms. So turning now to the impacts on residential amenity. This next photograph, which you have seen before, is taken from the front boundary of Elderbeck, and it illustrates the lighting already approved on the staff block. You note that there's shadows on the side wall from lighting on the houses on the opposite side of the road, and that the light on the bungalow to the left-hand side is not part of this application, it's not development, and we have no control over it. So my final photograph illustrates part of the amended lighting on from the front boundary of Elderbeck, and you can see quite just how low key that is. I'm satisfied that this amended lighting scheme has addressed the concerns of the neighbours and members' previous concerns relating to the impact on residential amenity. I have to report to you that I've received a late representation from the owners of Elderbeck. They have advised that they are happy with the revised application and the comments made by Fold. They note that the sensors appear to be wind sensitive and ask if this can be rectified. They have also asked for these following photographs to be displayed. These lights are at low level. There's 4 on each side of the building. These are the ones in the right-hand photo. You can see the boundary fence with the road. On preliminary investigation, these do not appear to have been approved. I've therefore opened a new compliance case, but I would stress that this is a separate matter to this application and really shouldn't be under consideration today. We're looking at the situation with regard to those lights. So the lighting details as they relate to the first floor landings and the stairs are now considered to be a great improvement over the previously refused scheme. The amended proposals are very low key and do not result in any adverse landscape impact, neither do they adversely affect the residential amenities of the neighbouring dwellings. My recommendation is therefore one of unconditional approval. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. Any questions, members for Jackie? Andy?
Yeah, just on your last photo, the one before that, one that, did you not say that the green emergency lights would be only on when triggered? So is that them triggered or not?
No, the low green light is on permanently. Yeah. Previously, there were really bright white lights associated with the fire exit signs, which were very intrusive. Those now only come on in the case of emergency.
No other questions? No, we've got some public speaking. We've got Mr. and Mrs. Bettington. Come forward, please. So it's 5 minutes whenever you're ready, and we'll run the timer whenever you start to speak.
Good morning, everyone. We last met at the beginning of May this year, when thankfully this committee unanimously disagreed with the proposal from the planning department to approve unconditionally the existing balcony lighting and stairwell lights in breach of the planning conditions. We are now 7 months on and you are considering a much improved lighting system, which hopefully now meets the conditions. If approved, we look forward to it being installed in a more timely manner. The long and fraught saga is approaching 3 years, and the mountain of emails to get the balcony lighting to meet the permit condition. This should not be normal practice. From the photographs, you will see the brightness on the external wall lights previously permitted, and where we are now, we wonder if they would get approval. Finally, we would like to thank the Friends of the Lakes and the Parish Council for their submissions, but we especially would like to thank this committee for their decision in May, and this has been left up to the planning department alone. We would not have been looking at a much improved proposal today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? No, that's great. Thank you very much. We have the agent for the application, Mr. Knight. You have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Yeah, hi, Chair and committee and members. First, I'd like to apologise for probably wasting lots of time for the committee over a long period of time. It's been very difficult to find lighting that would suffice on the terrace. It's quite an unusual design, really. It's an old type design, and the lights that we chose twice previous were casting light onto the render, which was glaring away from the building. So what we've done now, we've spent lots of time finding the lowest lamp of light we can find, which is the orange light you've seen today, which are on individual motion sensors and don't provide any glare. And we've had to spend time whilst measuring light levels, measuring safety levels as well, because we've got a safety means of escape to achieve for staff. So I thought I'm grateful that Martin and Dan have approved that today, and we will implement that immediately on receipt of the approved condition.
Okay, thank you. Any questions before you go? No, that's great. Thank you. If you wouldn't mind switching the microphone off, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, members, we've seen it before. The video was really good, really helpful. Anyone want to start? Jim?
Thank you, Jackie, for your report and video. Looked like you picked a really nice evening to do that. But it was incredibly dark. That's the powerful. For me, it feels like a good solution, and actually it looks like a good model that hopefully can be replicated elsewhere. So I think it's a big step forward, and I'm very happy to propose to go with the officer's recommendation.
Peter?
Thanks, Mark. Yes, I echo what Jim said. I think I'm really pleased that we rejected it on first sight. I think that's a massively better solution. It's almost, I think it could form the benchmark of that kind of lighting. It's clearly demonstrably better. We've never been thanked from a public speaker before, so I think that's worth noting as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's usually
and thanks to the developers and agent for putting that work in. So I'm happy to second Jim's proposal.
Anyone else? Nope. Proposed by Jim, seconded by Peter. All those in favour?
It's unanimously approved.
Okay. So our next application, thank you, Jackie, is number 6 on our list, and that's land adjacent to Dixon Ground Farm in Coniston. I'm guessing we don't have the slides on the PowerPoint.
It's for the YouTube and members of the public only, although our members of the public are speaking, so we're probably quite familiar with the slides, but it'll be for a record of the meeting. I'm looking at for any techniques to access the planning tool better than I normally do it. Yeah.
Already been granted for the siting of 4 shepherd's huts at the site for use as holiday accommodation. This is a Section 73 application which seeks variations to conditions and approval of details under conditions as set out in the report. The application is being reported to the committee as my recommendation for approval is contrary to the views of Coniston Parish Council. My report is complete and there's not anything further to add to it, so we'll just whiz through the slides. The location plan shows the site on the western side of Coniston, immediately adjoining this rural service centre. The block plan shows the line of the footpath on the northeast side of the plan, which is the purple line, and the nearby listed buildings are highlighted in green. The aerial photograph gives more context to the site. The southern boundary, as you see there, consists of a steep upward slope with which is partially treed, and the northern and western boundaries have well established hedges on them. I now have a series of photographs which illustrate the site. The site is actually behind the evergreen trees that you see there. The parking area where the cars are parked has already been established. The line of the footpath is shown by the white arrow. You can actually see the end of one of the huts that are already in position. So moving up the footpath to sort of the right of this. Next one. This is the northern boundary of the site with the footpath. You can see the mature hedging, the trees. Walking further along the footpath, this is the northwest boundary of the site with the adjoining field. So that returns back to where the slope is and the existing access to the site, which will be used to access the accessible hut, which is to be located at this end of the site. And then the final photograph is looking back along. So I've come past that access, looking back, coming down the footpath, and the boundary to the adjoining field is quite substantial as well. So the application is seeking various amendments, revisions to conditions and agreement of details. Essentially, the amendments and details now sought relate to the positioning and orientation of the huts on the site, the provision of hot tubs, 1 for each hut, additional landscaping within the site, external lighting, and details of the management plan. So here we have the approved site layout and the proposed site layout, and you can see that 3 of the huts have essentially been turned through 90 degrees, and then the one at the very top of the screen has been rotated through 180 degrees. This is the accessible hut, and a parking space is now proposed there for this hut. 4 parking spaces are still retained within the overall site. The hot tub breach on the proposed plan are the circles with the semicircles around them. I hope you can see them. And you'll see the other difference is the landscaping areas between the huts has now also been shown. So looking at some of the details, fairly standard hot tub details. They are semi-screened by timber screen fences, and there will be one fixed spotlight on that fence, which will be angled down onto the hot tub itself. It's fixed, it can't be moved, and the kelvins for that are 2,800 kelvins. A canopy has now been provided for each hut, which you can see in the top left photograph. These are over the main entrances. The lighting on the huts themselves are these sort of lantern lights that are shown. There's two on the main entrances under the canopy and one by each rear door. These lights are 2,700 Kelvin, so that's a warm yellow light as shown in the bottom left photo. In general, subject to a condition regarding maximum light levels for all the lighting of 2,700 kelvins, these amendments and details are considered to be acceptable in appearance and in terms of landscape impact, given the context of the site and its screening. The details given under conditions 8, the site management plan, which is mainly the lighting, and condition 9, the landscaping that I've pointed out, are also considered to be acceptable. Turning now to residential amenity and impact, there are 3 nearby dwellings. These are High Dixon Ground, Usher's Joinery and Dixon Ground Farmhouse. Now at Usher's Joinery, just close to the top of that blue arrow, there's an extant planning permission for a dwelling in that building. With the farmhouse and this house, Usher's Joinery, there are intervening buildings and trees, and I consider that the lighting, the use of the hot tubs would not adversely impact on the amenities of these properties. The main concerns with the application relate to the hot tubs and lighting pollution. The objection has come from High Dixon Ground, which is at a higher level to the site, and from the parish council. So the following photos relate to the relationship with High Dixon Ground. And the last photograph overlooking the site is taken from the entrance to the electricity substation. Which is here. This is the timber gate I'm going to show you, and that's the gate to the substation. The photograph is taken from here, and we'll get to that in a second. So with the first photograph, shows the site, one of the huts in the middle of the site in location, and I've arrowed in, you can just see the chimney and the top of the gable of High Dixon Ground up the slope in the back of the photo. Next photo is looking up the driveway to High Dixon Ground. Note the very high hedge along the driveway on the right hand side, and the very end part you can see the timber gate I just pointed out to you, and the very end of that hedge, it actually forms the southern boundary of the site. So the gate in this photo leads through to the electricity substation. The site is down behind that substantial hedge, and then the photo, which is the only view from High Dixon Ground down onto the site, is here. as I've said, the main concerns relate to hot tubs and lighting. However, given that it's likely that only 2 people, these are small huts, they have a double bed in them, they can only accommodate 2 people, so 2 people at a time in the hot tub is fairly limited use, and taking into account the distances from the nearest residential properties, the intervening topography and structures, I'm satisfied that there would be no adverse impacts on the amenity of the surrounding properties from the use of the hot tubs or from the lighting proposed. Paragraph 517 of my report sets out how each condition should be amended to take account of the revisions and the details now sought. And subject to these amended conditions and the additional condition relating to lighting levels, my recommendation is to approve the application subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Any questions, Andy?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So on that photograph there, which is the only one you showed that can see into the site, with that hut there, where would its hot tub be, or where is it roughly? So you can't see it for the trees.
Bearing in mind, this is where the bins are kept in a very narrow gap. It's not the general view from the garden. I'd be surprised if you had direct view of it.
Hot tubs, the light that was going to be on the fence, is that the only lighting? There's no lights within the hot tub. Some hot tubs have lights inside that can flash or just stuff on all the time. Is there lighting within the hot tub as well, or is it just the fence, one on the fence?
I don't actually know that. I don't have experience of hot tubs. Maybe that's something
Well, maybe we could
to ask the applicants.
Phil.
Yeah, thank you for the insightful remarks, Jackie. The fact that High Dixon Ground is near and is a holiday let, that doesn't influence our thoughts in any way, shape or form, does it?
Is a holiday let or not, it's still a dwelling. It can be occupied as a dwelling, and so I've treated it as a dwelling. Yeah,
They might get hot tub themselves, mightn't they?
There was, Jim.
Jackie, in the report, I didn't see any mention of what happens to the wastewater. Now, from my memory, particularly in some other resorts, hot tubs need to be emptied every week when the guests change over, and that can give quite significant problems to the wastewater systems. Do you know what it was here, or did you consider that, or did it come up during your review?
I am aware that drainage has been installed on the site that goes, I think, into the main drainage. Other than that, I can't be 100% certain, but you've got the applicant and the agent here who might be able to answer that question for you.
Do you think it's connected to the main sewers?
Well, we can ask, I think.
We can ask.
Is it because it's highly chlorinated water?
It's got a lot of chemicals, and I'm conscious if you overwhelm the existing system. What's happening elsewhere in the country is they empty all the hot tubs on a Friday. It's overwhelming the local sewage system, and it's then impacting in the local rivers and sea because of the sheer volume of chlorinated water that's going in at the same time.
I thought they just opened the plug and dumped it on the ground, but we can ask.
You wouldn't have much grass.
Any other questions, members, before we go to our speakers? No. So we've got public speaking. We've got Mr. Tongue and Mr. Johnson, who is available to answer questions. Do you want to pop up? So 5 minutes between you both, however you want to split it, if you want to split it. Oh, right. You've had a couple of questions already. Okay. So just to go ahead whenever you're ready.
So in relation to the lighting, there is a single light within the hot tubs, just so you can see, but there's no flashing lights. It's just one static light. That's all. And in terms of it, they are connected to the mains. The main drain runs through the site. Any other questions?
Any questions? No. What's the physical distance from, I suppose, the nearest hot tub to the house at High Dixon Ground, roughly? I've seen a sort of a 150 feet, right? Okay, so it's a fair distance.
Dixon Ground, Dixon Ground is quite a lot higher.
Yeah.
Above. There are a lot of trees between, and a lot of trees that we have recently planted, which are growing. So, intention is to create a screened barrier between two entities.
Okay, Rick.
Following up on Jim's point, when these hot tubs are emptied, has there been any consultation with the Water Authority regarding 4 tubs being emptied at once?
There hasn't been, sorry, can you hear me? There hasn't been any consultation, but we are aware and we have been notified by United Utilities that they are making significant improvements as we speak to the sewage works at Coniston, with a lot of holding tanks and extra facilities that they didn't have before anyway. And that work is ongoing at the present time.
No more questions? That's it. Thank you very much. I've just switched the microphone off. Right, members, who wants to start us off with this one? Tubs. Phil.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to move the officer recommendation. I was mindful of the comments of the Coniston Parish Council that they're not native to Coniston hot tubs, and I couldn't see John Ruskin in one, but I think there's no real reason why we can't prevent these people from having the hot tubs.
Okay, so that's a proposal. Andy?
Yeah, I would be happy to second the proposal. Say hot tubs, and when people go on holiday, is becoming the norm. We need to keep up with things in the Lake District as well. We don't want to just attract people that just want to go and walk the fells. They said accessible to parking for the one is a plus point, you know. So we are attracting people that with different mobility issues, and not everybody can come to the lakes and walk the high fells. If it's another attraction to bring people to the lakes to spend money locally, I'll be up for it. So I'm going to second the proposal.
Okay. Anyone else before we go to the vote? Okay, proposed by Phil, seconded by Andy. All those in favour? All those against? Abstention? 1 abstention.
That's 5 in favour, 1 abstention.
Okay, members, that's the end of our public speaking items. Does anyone want 5 minutes to grab a cake? Yes, come back in 5 minutes. Okay, we'll get back into it. Our next application is number 1 on the list, Rooking House Farm. Laura's come to tell us all about this one.
Thank you, Chairman. This application seeks full planning permission and listed building consent to refurbish existing holiday letting accommodation, to erect a single-storey lean-to extension, and to convert the existing storage barn for additional holiday letting accommodation at Rooking House Farm. The application has been brought to you today as my recommendation of approval is contrary to the views of Matterdale Parish Council. Before I go any further, got an update. Since writing my report, we have had a query whether a condition should be added that the converted storage barn's use should be restricted as short-term holiday letting purposes to those visiting Rooking House Farm. The reason for this is that local needs housing so close to activities which take place on the site would not be compatible and has the potential either to make living conditions unacceptable to permanent occupants or to adversely impact existing businesses. I agree with this and I recommend that this condition be added to an approval. So Rooking House is an established farm, activity centre and equestrian business located in an open countryside location 2 miles south of Troutbeck and the A66. The central Rooking House site consists of the main activity centre, the equestrian arena, a Grade 2 listed farmhouse, adjoining Grade 2 listed accommodation barn, and a small barn currently used as storage of equipment used on the activity centre. The application site relates to the accommodation barn and to the existing storage barn. Currently, the accommodation barn has 7 bedrooms, all located on the first floor, catering for 15 visitors. The addition of the single-storey lean-to on the barn's southwest elevation, which you can see on the proposed site plan on the right, would result in the addition of accessible accommodation, and the conversion of the storage barn from storage to holiday letting accommodation would not result in an increase in its footprint. The existing ground floor of the accommodation, which you can see on the left of the accommodation barn, is currently used as a communal cooking, dining and functioning area with a toilet and shower block. The addition of the lean-to, which you can see on the right, would result in an integrated, self-contained, accessible accommodation consisting of 2 bedrooms, kitchen living area and bathroom facilities. The storage barn would result in the creation of 1-bed, self-catered, detached accommodation with kitchen, living area and bathroom facilities. As mentioned earlier, the first floor of the barn accommodates 7 bedrooms for 15 visitors. There would be a slight alteration in this arrangement, with 2 of the bedrooms becoming ensuite bathrooms, but there would still be accommodation for 15 people on this floor. Moving on to looking at site photos. As we can see, this is the existing storage barn with the accommodation barn at the edge of the photo on the right. Here we can see the southwest elevation of the storage barn with the accommodation barn behind. And the lean-to you can see here was granted in 2006. And this is the northwest elevation of the storage barn and the accommodation barn with the lean-to which was approved in 2006. And here we've illustrated what the lean-to barn would look like. And this is the proposed elevations. Oh no, sorry, existing elevations. You can see on the storage barn, there is a little window on the gable end with no windows at all on the sides. On these proposed elevations, you can see the little window would become a large window with the window following the apex of the storage barn, the addition of 2 windows. And on the bottom here, we see the proposed lean-to with an access door, 2 roof lights and a window. Apologies, this should be
existing elevations, not proposed. So yes, we can see here, this is the lean-to that was approved in 2006. And here is the proposed elevations. Oops, sorry. So in conclusion, I recommend that planning permission and listed building consent be granted, as a proposed lean-to and external alterations would be consistent with the existing buildings and therefore would conserve the character and appearance of the listed building and the character of the surrounding landscape. I also consider the conversion of the storage barn and the construction of the lean-to would improve the facilities and accommodation available at Rooking House Farm. Thank you.
Laura, any questions for Laura? Nope. Shall we get into it? Who'd like to start? As the parish council made an objection, they think it could be used as a home, really. Rick.
I mean, I'd reinforce the point that's been made, is that it's not suitable for permanent occupation so close to a business. If occupiers were in there, they could complain about a nuisance. The nuisance would be taken against the business and the business would be affected, not the occupiers. So it would be foolhardy for the business to allow it to happen, but it's reasonable to restrict the occupancy.
Anyone else?
Yeah. I agree with Rick's view, and I'm supportive of the additional condition. The only bit I sort of balked at a little bit was the large glass, but I'm struggling to, for a couple of points on the proposed elevation at the end of the lean-to, I think it is. It's a very large glass window. I'm struggling to vision. Yes, that one there, the top one. You see that large window there? That was, beyond that, I was very happy with the designs. Just gave me a little niggle as to whether that was in keeping. Although on the previous development there was another large window put in from.
Definitely a very modern style. That
yeah,
was huge.
It just looks out of keeping with the rest, but otherwise clearly feels like an improvement. Feels more accessible accommodation. We're supporting a business. Feels like in many respects it fits in with exactly what we would like to do. I'm just struggling with that glass window, and I don't know if anyone else had picked up on that or people felt it was okay.
You find it so unacceptable you don't want to refuse it?
It's where that's where I was struggling. I'm just conscious about they're quite important buildings, aren't they?
Yeah, well, yeah.
And we got a photograph where it would be in relation to the view of the buildings.
I mean, is there a public view of it, Laura, or would there be?
Just from the car park on site.
Right.
So there wouldn't be any public views of it.
It's on the end of that storage building, is it? Is that? Yeah, so it would actually be the first thing you'd see as you enter the site. Just felt a bit much to me, given the nature of the other buildings around it.
Andy?
Yeah, I can see where Jim's coming from, but to offset that, if you didn't put as big a window then, would that mean more openings down the side, looking the other way, which may be more visible from off-site? So to keep less on the side, I could probably live with the bigger one on the end, you know, as an offset, just to give natural light inside. Otherwise, you end up with a dark, dingy building that you don't got to put a lot of lights on inside. More electric, more power, more everything.
Yeah, the question I would ask is the concern over the window because of the impact on the design appearance of the building, or the design appearance of the locality? And the second application is for a listed building consent, and it might be an issue that you would want to consider with the listed building, but not necessarily the planning application. if you really wanted to be pedantic about it.
But just check, Laura, the main barn is listed, but that storage building is not. That's correct, isn't it?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Sorry, just for my own clarification, things close to listed buildings should be considered because of the impact they may have on those buildings.
Yeah, yeah, curtilage listed.
And I did also probably should have asked that question earlier, whether this point I'm debating is valid here or invalid in the next application we're looking at.
Sorry, so okay, so the curtilage listing. So a listed, I haven't got the regs in front of me, but a listed building comprises the building that's in the listing, anything that's attached to the building, and anything which is within or has formed part of the curtilage since on or before the 1st of July 1948. You have to decide whether the building has curtilage. So sometimes it'll be really obvious, like a house, a dwelling house with a garden around it and a nice little shed in the garden or something, or outbuilding. It's clearly got curtilage, hasn't it? It's got land which is in association with it and with that use. Not all buildings will have curtilage. I'm not convinced that that building is within the curtilage of the big barn, because I'm not convinced that the big barn has curtilage. So I think your options are with the window. If you think that that makes the whole thing unacceptable, you refuse it. If you think that on balance, taking into account everything, you know, the benefits of the development to the business, it could be made, notwithstanding that you find some harm to the window, if you find the window harmful, you could approve it. Or I think, and I would rarely say this because you can't split a decision, but you can, I think in the circumstances, because that element is so minor and so discrete, I think you could probably impose a condition that says we grant planning permission for everything other than that gable window, if that really was the if that made an otherwise unacceptable development acceptable.
Andy.
Yeah, and I was using the offsetting of they're going to get rid of the horrible tin roof. But anything that would make that building look more appealing anyway as well. I was using that. I was looking at what it will look like ultimately against what it looks like now. That's why I was acceptable for the bigger window on the end. So I would be quite happy if we want to move. If everybody else finished talking, I would
make a proposal
that we accept the application.
Yep. Andy's moving for the, so we've got the planning application, then we've got the listed building consent, which we haven't come to yet. Oh, okay, right. Okay, so members, we can make a decision now. We can make a proposal for the application and the listed building consent, because it's kind of the same thing. Or you can split them up if you want, Andy.
I'm still happy to propose both together. That's what we need to do. That's fine. I'm happy.
Rick?
I mean, I'm quite happy.
Second for both.
Second.
Yep. Anyone else? Yep. I think the roof's got rustic charm.
What do they call it?
So we've got a proposal from Andy, seconded by Rick. Propose that we grant permission for items number 1 and 2. All those in favour? That's it.
It's unanimously approved and listed building consent.
So our next one is number 3. And we are going to the northern Tribeca, the Sportsman Inn.
Thank you, Chair. So this application seeks planning permission to convert part of the Sportsman Inn public house into 2 holiday lets, and for the siting of 9 holiday camping pods within the field to the west of the Sportsman Inn. The application is before committee because recommendation of approval is contrary to the views of the parish council. There is one update to the report before members. Since writing the report, we've received consultation response from Natural England, specifically regarding the nutrient neutrality solution proposed. There's been a bit of back and forward between the applicant and Natural England couple of tweaks to the report that they've submitted. But following those amendments, Natural England have raised no objection to the proposals in terms of nutrient neutrality. So to locate yourselves, we're just north of the A66, west of Penruddock, on the minor road that leads out of Penruddock, close to the junction with the 66 base camp. Cafe and development is further south, opposite the site, and Sportsman Inn is located fronting on to that minor road just west of Penruddock. The building itself is currently closed for refurbishment. It's been closed for a number of years, and this proposal is to bring the public house back into use and redevelop the site itself. This satellite imagery gives a bit of an overview of the site that we're dealing with. The western field here is where the camping pods would be situated. The car parking is to be sited within the existing hard standing, and then the eastern field is to be left as is. Site plan here shows the proposals overview. So again, the eastern part of the public house is to be converted into 2 holiday lets. I'll show a more detailed plan later on. The car parking is to be formalised and expanded over the space of the existing hard standing. And then to the eastern side would be the siting of 9 camping pods, each with a terrace to the front, parking area to the side, and all served by an estate road through the middle. Landscaping proposed for the northern boundary of the field and the western side as well. So plan here shows a bit of an overlay between the satellite imagery and the proposed site plan, predominantly just to indicate the existing hard standing that's in place and how that would be used to formalise the parking area and the kind of beer garden to north as well. So no increase in the size of the hard standing, just formalisation of the parking area. So to bring forward the 2 holiday lets, a couple of minor alterations to the building proposed, focused on the eastern side of it. So 2 new windows would be added at ground floor level, and a small lean-to extension would be built on the side. Again, matching materials are proposed in terms of render and slate for the structure. These plans show the proposed floor plans. So 1 holiday let would be in this blue area, and a smaller holiday let in the red area here. Each would have a small garden area and parking to the east. Parking associated with the pods would be adjacent to each one of the units, and then the parking for the public house would be down to the south. Improvements more widely are proposed in terms of the terracing area that would be associated with the beer garden. This plan is useful as an indication as to why we've considered that these 2 units are unsuitable for local needs. The close relationship in terms of the party wall between the units and the public house being one area of concern, whether that can be successfully operated as a permanent local needs house. In our opinion, that party wall and close relationship poses some issues. Similarly, the outdoor space and its proximity to the outdoor kind of terrace area, again, introduces some potential issues in terms of amenity, why we consider that relationship isn't suitable for permanent occupation, and therefore why it is acceptable as a holiday let. So moving on to some photos of the sites. So the main view from that road, showing the kind of traditional coaching in kind of character of that public house. Again, looking back eastwards, that's the view towards Penruddock eventually as you go along that road. To the right hand side of the photo is the main access that would lead down to the primary parking area and the camping pods. Moving further round, this is a view overlooking where the pods would be located. Again, note the boundary screening and the elevated nature of that, which offers fairly decent screening for views into that field. The field itself becomes more open as you get down towards the A66 here. It's pretty much on the junction with the A66. That open aspect of the field is more prominent and has been the focus of that landscaping. So that western part of that field is where a lot of that planting is proposed to be implemented. A few shots from Google Street View, but it demonstrates that relationship and views from the 66 itself. So the application site is here in this corner here. So views of the camping pods would be afforded from this position. But as you move further on the A66, the banking rises, so it largely screens those camping pods to that viewpoint primarily. And this has been demonstrated again by some of the photo montages proposed by the applicant. So moving from top to bottom, that's moving in a westward direction, closer to the site, and then back looking eastwards. Again, some indication of the effect that the planting would have when it comes to full growth. And then the final photos again from that minor road above the site. So in summary, the principle of development is considered acceptable. Policy 02 would support the development in terms of supporting existing business. Policy 18 affords support for the retention of drinking establishment. There are some acknowledged impacts in the short to medium term as that planting and landscaping takes time to take effect. So there would be some minor impacts in terms of those views from the west into that field with the camping pods, but over time that would be largely screened by the proposed landscaping. There are no other issues identified as part of the application, therefore we recommend approval subject to the conditions laid out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Any questions? Rick?
The argument regarding the use of the pub as a holiday accommodation, is that not very similar to what we just discussed in terms of looking house? And it's a good reason not to allow.
Yeah, correct.
So the second question would be, are the camping pods regarded as a use of land as opposed to erection of a building?
Yes, they are, which is why we've recommended a condition to control the number of pods on that site to 9.
There'll be caravans, won't they? Andy?
So in principle, if we agree this application, we're bringing the pub back into use that's currently closed and has been for a long time. There's 2 extra accommodation buildings adjoined to it and 9 pods by the looks of it with hot tubs. By looking at the picture, so that's what we're seeking permission for.
Well,
oh, thank you, Phil. Can you just remind me about the pub? Because it always strikes me that we all say, "Oh, it's wonderful to have a local pub," but then nobody goes to the local pub, and then you suddenly discover, "Gosh, who'd run a business like this?" And so, how long would it be? Are we putting any conditions on the fact that it becomes a public house where people can go and do whatever, or were it not to succeed as a public house, which it didn't do? Is there an obligation to keep it open? Does that, or could that be converted into holiday accommodation?
So we applied ourselves to precisely that point because, especially policy 18 only affords support for it because it's supporting a public house. So condition number 4 says that the public house shall be brought back into use within 9 months of the first occupation of the holiday lets or camping pods. So we're requiring the public house to be brought into use within 9 months from either of those 2 aspects being implemented. In the event that the use of the public house ceases for a period of 6 months, in excess of 6 months, then holiday let use and that shall cease, or the camping pods shall be removed from the site. So it's directly connecting the operation of that holiday accommodation or the running of those camping pods to the continued activity of that public house. So in the event that that ceases, then it wouldn't benefit from either of those.
It's a bit like farm diversification, I suppose. It's tied to the underlying business that you're trying to support with the policy. Andy?
Yeah, I maybe missed it. Did it say how big the pods were? How many people per pod? Was it 4 2-bedroom?
No, it's smaller. So it's shown on this plan here. So it's essentially an open plan space, one double bed, small kitchenette, one bathroom, so two people essentially per pod.
But potentially there could be 24 people on site with the two other accommodation, the two buildings and the 9 pods. You could have 20 odd people there, which will in theory they're hoping make the pub sustainable with people that are staying in them, and then locals keep coming to, well, come again because it's available. So
you'd think the income from the pods would carry the pub. Jim.
Thank you. Yeah, I like the condition linking the pub to the pods. Well done. I think that's really good. I accept the argument it really wouldn't be appropriate to put local needs housing slap bang in the middle of that. That doesn't work for me. I think it's a great location for the pub. It would be good to see it come back into service, because I believe there's a fair passing trade as well that they could pick up at that location with people heading to or from the lakes. So I see it as a real asset for the loss of a relatively small amount of greenfield land. So overall, very supportive and happy to propose a Borough Officer's recommendation.
Anyone not second? Yeah, anyone else? No? Okay, proposed by Jem, second by Peter. All those in favour, as per Officer's recommendation. It's unanimous.
Unanimously approved.
Okay, moving on to our last application, and that's number 7. The old vicarage at Far Sorry. Are you doing this, Andrew? Bill?
Yes, I'm doing it. So yeah, Old Vicarage, Far Sorry, planning permission is sought for the construction of a 12-metre by 5-metre swim pond in the garden area behind the building. The application is before committee because recommendation of approval is contrary to the views of the parish council. So the Old Vicarage is a large Victorian property that's been converted into a number of flats situated northwest of Far Sorry. The only neighbouring property close by is Jemima Cottage to the northeast. The primary public vantage points of the garden area are from Cuckoo Brow Lane, which also carries a public right of way as well. Permission is sought for a swim pond. This comprises a small upper header pond in the garden area, which would be linked to a larger pond, 12 metres by 5 metres, steps at one end, and shallow pebble area at the other. It would be used, or could be used as a pond for swimming in. Depth is around 1.5 metres, as shown on those plans. So the location of it would be, roughly speaking, in around the centre of the photo. Small header pond would be situated on higher land, catch rainfall, and would drain into the lower, larger pond itself. Photo shows Jemima Cottage, which is situated above the site. Again, we're talking around the centre of the photo here, where the structure would be built. Looking out of the site, these are the two main public vantage points: the road further on, and Cuckoo Brown Lane, which is carries the public right of way. Again, note the set down nature of it and the high banking, so views of the pond itself would be fairly limited given the lay of the land. And then again, a final photo looking down around where the bench is, and the pond would be situated just below there. And then a photo showing the relationship between those two dwellings. So I don't see any, in principle, issue with it. It's small scale domestic works within an existing garden area. The primary concern raised by the parish council is regarding drainage. There are no known surface water drainage issues in that area, and the proposals don't raise any specific concerns in terms of flooding. I therefore recommend the application is acceptable and to the conditions laid out in the report. Thank you.
It's one of these naturally filtered swimming ponds. Rick?
There's no risk of it being used other than ancillary to the domestic enjoyment of the dwelling?
No, so I think if it was, frankly speaking, I don't think it's of a size where it could be commercially used. But even if it were, and we were able to conclude a material change of use, then we would have the ability to take action against it. But I don't envisage, given its location and its size, that it would be particularly suitable for any kind of commercial activity.
And there's no flashing lights in it to keep Andy happy?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Anyone want to move us on, Jane?
The lighting is a point, and maybe we should condition lighting and any else, that, because another point was made about the quality of the drawings, and I accept we can get the gist of what the plan is from here. Maybe it should be really clear that we wouldn't expect lighting, we wouldn't expect a little changing room or anything like that to be built to be associated with it. Would that be acceptable to add conditions of that nature?
I think the changing room, well, depending on what it would be an active development itself. Lighting, by all means, we could put a condition on that sought to control any external lighting associated with it if members felt that was required to do that.
Do others think? My preference would be to do so because it would change it from the natural pond in my mind if it became lit up and glowing at night.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because what's there is very modest and yes, very modest, but you only need 4 pillars all around it, flood lighting onto it, and it'd be completely transformed. So I would agree with the condition for lighting.
Rick?
Clarification, the buildings uses 4 flats as opposed to 1 single dwelling.
5 flats, I believe, yes.
So is the pool available for use by just 1 flat? Or
I do not know that. It's been applied by 1 individual, and the application says 1, the old vicarage, and so there are 4 other flats on top of that. I don't know the relationship of how that garden is separated out between those 2 flats, whether they've got communal use of it. I don't know, but it's not been an issue that we've identified, because they will have some arrangement in place that controls how that garden is used for the amenity, the betterment of those flats. So I don't identify any particular issue with that.
Andy?
So is it going to be naturally fed from groundwater? There is groundwater that's going to feed it from somewhere. They're not pumping water in, because in theory, if it's a small pond then that's gathering original groundwater that filters down to a bigger pond. Knowing Cumbria as it is, there'll be about 2 days a year where it'll be warm enough to get in. If it wasn't grown over with weeds by then, or full of ducks. I don't have an issue with it, but as long as it's naturally fed from a water source locally, that isn't then going to impact on, because you divert it into there, somewhere else hasn't got any water left as a natural water course. Is there a water course that runs through the garden now?
I'm not aware that they are hydrologically linking this to anything. My understanding is it will just be fed by kind of rainwater and filled up and maintained that way. I don't believe it's naturally fed in any way.
You might have to put the hose in it or abandon it in the summer if we do get a dry summer.
Yeah, so the 2 weeks in summer when it's warm enough, it'll be dry because it hasn't rained. Okay.
It's just like a lot of Cumbrian puddles, it fills up and it empties.
Jim?
I think as long as we've retained the natural look and we've protected ourselves from the lighting, I can't see any harm in it, so I'm happy to say we go with officer's recommendation.
With a lighting condition.
With a lighting condition.
Anyone second that? Andy?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that.
Anything else counter to that? No. Okay, all in favour? You got that for the lighting condition, Andrew?
Unanimously.
Right, that's our planning applications done. We'll go through the rest of the agenda. So delegated planning applications, anything on the list that you want to raise? Anything on the compliance list? There's some consultation responses there. Something about land west of Stockbridge at Thorpe Field Stockridge, no. Appeals lodged, one there, Ambleside, and appeals decided. Any questions on the appeals? All dismissed. And that's us for the meeting. We do have an away hour. Abby's come to tell us about that. Do you want to grab a sandwich while Abby presents, or can you hang on? You want to? Right, okay. Could you just give us 1 minute, Abby, and we'll grab a sandwich and then appeal yours. Yeah, it'll be more 5 minutes. Could you switch off the recording? We're having a sort of working lunch, and then once Abby's done a presentation, we'll then dive into it properly. If anyone wants to grab a sandwich before then.